How do you get rid of Derrick Henry in Dynasty, or do you even trade him at all? Is this a player that we say, ride the train until it derails? That's up to you. And it's also up to your league. How likely is your league or your league mates to trade? And I've found that in leagues where I do own, and I have Derrick Henry in one existing Dynasty league that I've won a championship 2 out of the last 3 years because of him, I've found that nobody wants to trade for him. The most you could get is something that's ridiculous to even accept. Second rounders in a 2025 rookie draft. No one's even giving you a future down the line first rounder. There really is not much of an opportunity to trade him. I mean, you could explore it. You could try and go across position and get a wide receiver for somebody's wide receiver that, they have an excess of, and they're like, I need an RB and I want to win this year. Certainly unique situations you might be able to encounter, but for the most part, you will find it hard to trade Derrick Henry at all in a way that makes sense in 2025 and beyond. You're most likely holding on to him. But there's also a different angle. You could go after him. If he can't be sold for anything but second round rookie value, or for a wide receiver 3 that has upside, then maybe it's time to go knocking on doors and acquire the man at what's considered value slightly above that. Now, there's a fine line of, hey, Smitty, you just proved it. If you can't get anything for him, you're just going to hold on to him. Most people that own Henry are going to do the same thing. Hell no. They're going to say, hell no, I'm not trading you, Derrick Henry, for a second round rookie pick. Some people might, but so you're going to have to up the ante a little bit, but don't go into the territory of value that I'm telling you I would accept for my Derrick Henry in a trade in Dynasty. But can you up the ante enough to go steal him away at ridiculous value because a panic Peter is like, I want to get something before the thing derails? We're going to break down what you could maybe surrender in Dynasty to get Derrick Henry to ride this train one more time or even half a year. And then we'll discuss what might be an acceptable creative way of getting out of the Derrick Henry game in 2025 and beyond. The Fantasy Football Show begins right now. Okay, so basically, I think if we go over to board view and we say to ourselves, don't mind Breece Hall, who's not a first rounder this year. We're talking about in this particular video that Hall was a first rounder last year. He's probably not going to even be a second rounder this year. He's probably a third rounder. Maybe in Dynasty, he's still in the second, and this is great value. In Dynasty, go trade for Hall while his value is really low. As far as Derrick Henry, let me put his graphic on screen. I think there's a really, really good chance that Derrick Henry is probably going to be considered. I don't even know where his ADP might linger if, let's say, you were drafting right now in a Dynasty startup. It's hard to say. He wouldn't be in the first round. He wouldn't be in the second round. Wouldn't be in the third round. Wouldn't be in the fourth round. I don't know. I don't know if someone's willing to take a gamble. That's the odd part about this conversation, is I don't know if someone's going to take a gamble here, or here in a Dynasty startup in order to win now. I've got a buddy that drafts for the redraft in all of his Dynasty startups because 10 times out of 10, these Dynasty leagues fold within 4 or 5 years. And that's because of a few different factors. One, people trade away all their draft picks, ruin their team, and then they stop wanting to shovel out $100 a year just to lose when they've really set themselves up for disaster. So then they come up with the excuse of, hey, my wife wants me to cut down on the leagues. And then you end up having, to replace that owner. And then once you lose 2 or 3 good owners and you start filling those spots with garbage, owners, it just never rebounds. It just kind of spirals further and further out of control each year. And so the average Dynasty league, especially starting up a new one, I believe the old ones might linger, right? Because you've established longevity and brotherhood or whatever. But in a new startup Dynasty league, I'm giving it 4 to 5 years. So my buddy will draft Derrick Henry probably in the 4 or 5 round range, maybe even earlier, and everybody will laugh at him And then the league's going to fold by year 3, and he'll have won 2 championships. Now, I don't think Derrick Henry right now, has 2 to 3 years left. But this kind of thinking of avoiding Derrick Henry 2 years ago in Dynasty, and he was very much going later than he should in Dynasty 2 years ago. Even last year, Derrick Henry went way too late in a Dynasty startup, considering what he gave you for at least 1 year and probably, at least another half a year, I would say. If not, maybe one more. I do believe he's a guy that could tail off after double-digit weeks, but this is somebody walking into 2025 still has tremendous value. So I don't know where his dynasty value is, to be honest with you. I think we'd be guessing at this point. We don't have enough solid data, enough really a good amount of drafts to look at. You need a massive amount of data to actually draw too many conclusions. You can look at some early mocks, some very early ones, but the whole point would be, if you're trading for Derrick Henry, and let me get rid of the actual board because we don't necessarily need to have that conversation in terms of draft picks yet, but this is kind of what I'm thinking is an acceptable idea or concept to trade for Derrick Henry. So trade for, I would say something along the lines of, a second is what we would say no to, right? If we're trading away Derrick Henry, and the biggest bite we can get is somebody going, I'll give you a second rounder and a rookie pick. And we're like, no, yeah, do I take that? Hey, buddy over here, buddy A, do I take that? Hey, buddy B, can you answer that question? Do I take it? No, you don't take that. You ride the train till it derails at this point, right? So this is our baseline. This is what we try and do. Try and replicate it. Try and reverse osmosis the thing. Hey, Bob, in the other league where I don't have Derrick Henry, I'll give you a second rounder for him and see what he says. If he says no, then try 2 second rounders. Try a second, a third, or 2 second rounders, something along those lines. And if you can't get that done, then look at your excess points on your team. Do you have multiple quarterbacks? Are you somebody that was lucky enough to have Joe Burrow and JD5, and you're like perplexed every week anyways, and it's a 1 QB league? No one's saying trade Burrow or JD5 for Henry, but maybe you're able to get Henry and something pretty significant. Like, let's say they've got Laporta and they don't believe in Laporta. Now you're doing a Laporta and Henry for a QB type of trade. You got to get creative if you're trying to trade for Derrick Henry. It's not going to be easy. It's something that it's going to require different levels and layers of looking at what your team has. So the examples are going to be hard to project, like what I just gave you, Laporta and Henry for one of your extra quarterbacks, but you, of course, wouldn't trade JD5. But let's say you had a situation where maybe you had the extra tight end. Maybe you drafted Brock Bowers. Maybe you have Laporta, who you still love, and Njoku sitting on your roster, or another tight end that you really, really like, or DeAndre Swift or Tony Pollard. Their futures are ambiguous. You're trading those type of players, even if it's including a second rounder. So maybe you're trading a second rounder and Njoku for Derrick Henry, like something along those lines. The second isn't getting it done, so you're adding an extra piece. Maybe Njoku's not enough. Maybe you need to add a player that has been playing well and kind of popping off a little bit at the end of the year. Maybe this is a wide receiver that you just don't need, but they're doing fairly well. Maybe this is and even if I look at my thefantasyfootballshow.com rankings, which is a year-round fantasy football dynasty and redraft website, and if you notice, the dynasty content's in one color, the redraft's in another color. I love that change that I made this year because I wanted to get back to the grassroots of the channel or of the website, which is dynasty content. Not that I'm not going to produce redraft, but the redraft and dynasty content got lost, in that I didn't have the ability to kind of process what I was creating when I was creating it. Was it dynasty? Was it redraft? It kind of morphed into just a write-up that kind of talked about both, but it was all rooted in redraft. This way, I'm forced to write Dynasty content because I'll literally be looking at the Dynasty section of my website every day going, I haven't created any Dynasty content lately because I've divided it, I've isolated it, and I think it's going to create so much more grassroots content that we're, that you guys were used to getting year after year after year. Now, that's on me. I failed creating Dynasty content in 2024. I admit it. Take a lap on me. But this year I'm going to remedy that. So if we look at like wide receivers, like let's say you had let's say you had a player that was playing fairly well last year. Maybe we throw coming up with a name is even tough because you've got, I would personally give up an Ayuk to get Derrick Henry for just my running back arsenal. I don't believe Ayuk will regain his value at all. I think but you could even maybe get more. Ridley's older. Would I trade Ridley for Derrick Henry? Would I trade a player like Jacoby Myers, who people are kind of excited about, for Derrick Henry? And I'm not saying all these moves, make tons of sense for everybody, and especially if you need that wide receiver. But, a lot of you, in my opinion, could do without that Myers or that Ridley a lot easier than you could do without having a running back. So that's kind of where I go with that, okay? And not everybody will agree with some of those names, and that's fine. Okay, in a world where you're trading away Henry, you're trying to get, ultimately, what would you want? A first rounder. We just said you're probably looking at second rounders at best. No one wants to give a first rounder away to get Derrick Henry. But I think there's ways where you could do creative things like this. Bob is the worst team in the league, and we're a year away from 2026 draft picks, right? Bob is probably the worst first rounder, but no one's thinking that far ahead. Maybe you're the best team in the league. You're going to say, let's swap first rounders and I'll give you Derrick Henry. And that might seem like not the greatest idea now. And again, people are not looking that far ahead. But if this ends up being the 1.1, then you win your league and you're building a dynasty. This is a way to look very creatively at the process. Another way to get rid of Derrick Henry, trade away Henry, would be going after surpluses. Somebody has Laporta, as I mentioned. I would take Laporta in a heartbeat for Derrick Henry if I needed the tight end position filled and he's sitting out there. Upgrading, throwing him in as an accoutrement, an accessory, like icing on a cake, that will get things done. Like, let's say you've got a Brock Purdy at quarterback. You might be able to upgrade that slightly by throwing Henry in. Maybe you've got a running back like Hubbard, who I like. Maybe you add Henry and you upgrade that running back just slightly. It's just basically like an icing on the cake. And in the case of who you try and acquire, you're basically trying to get a player that somebody undervalues that you quietly like more than they do. And you're going to eventually run into a situation where they feel like, okay, I think this is actually the two players that we're swapping are kind of even. Like let's say you want to get rid of Waddle and Henry for one wide receiver, and you're going to go find that wide receiver that you quietly like better than Waddle, but you're eventually going to land a trade when somebody doesn't really find the wide receiver that you're acquiring to be that much better than Waddle. Maybe they quietly like Waddle more. An example of this would be something along the lines of London's probably too much to ask for, but let me just throw that out there. Probably not going to happen. His value is going to the moon. Before Penix Jr.'s last game, you might see that as a possibility. McConkey, probably not going to happen, but maybe the person loves Waddle near as much anyway, and they're worried about Higgins or Cooper Kupp being traded to the Chargers, and they think this is a possibility. Maybe like an MHJ. something like that could work, where maybe you love MHJ and you do believe he's going to be better than Waddle. Now, this is the beautiful part about what I'm trying to say here, is that some of you might be arguing you like Waddle more in Dynasty than MHJ. And some of you might be saying, no, I do like MHJ more. That's the beautiful part. You need to find the wide receiver, and it doesn't matter what I think or what Bob in the comments thinks. If you believe this player, and you don't even have to be set on MHJ, if you believe this player will be the player that shocks everybody, then it's worth throwing Derrick Henry in to get that icing on the cake type of move. The extreme would be like, okay, London, probably not going to happen. MHJ, very debatable to a lot of people. Waddle versus MHJ straight up. So there's an example of the other extreme. Garrett Wilson, something like that, is what you're going to try and use Henry to leverage that upgrade, if you even believe it to be an upgrade. So that's kind of the way that is going to roll. Appreciate you all being here. Make sure you go watch the redraft kind of version on the main channel. Your boy has 2 YouTube channels, in case you didn't know that and you're watching only the Dynasty channel. But go watch the main channel, youtube.com/The Fantasy Football Show, to watch the Derrick Henry redraft take. He's right in the graphic. Go check it out, and don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to get on over to thefantasyfootballshow.com. And also, don't forget that I have a Patreon, which is a year-round, 365, 24/7 live chat group for $10 a month. That's like a cup of coffee. Cancel anytime. Try it for 1 month. See if you like it for $10. Patreon.com/The Fantasy Football Show. Link in description. Now, get on out of here. Don't forget, I'm live on the main channel, youtube.com/The Fantasy Football Show, Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern.